Hello and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. The borders of Europe have the makings of a war zone. There's talk of a possible military clash. The crisis is growing by the day, growing worse by the day. You can see it from space now. Satellite images show more than 2,000 migrants camped at the Poland-Belarus border in very harsh conditions. Extreme cold. People are dying of hypothermia. Europe says these people, these migrants, have been sent to destabilize it, to destabilize the European Union. They're calling this the weaponization of migrants, and they're blaming Belarus and Russia for this. What is Moscow doing? It is flying jets, nuclear-powered bombers. The situation is escalating. The matter is being debated at the United Nations Security Council. On the ground, the migrants are battling life-threatening conditions. Whose problem are they? Whose responsibility is it to house these people? The migrant crisis is not limited to Europe. It is a universal problem. We've seen it in the US, we've seen it in the region in South Asia. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss how this is set to explode, how migrant wars may be the future. We'll discuss all of this. Also on the show, only in India is this decision a matter of debate. The army wants to take the Brahmos missile to the China border, but the government cannot expand the roads because the matter is stuck in court. Another Friday attack at yet another mosque in Afghanistan. What are the Taliban doing? They're target practicing at the Bamiyan Buddhas. Pakistan is trolling and abusing its cricket player Hasan Ali for dropping a catch in the last match. It doesn't help that his wife is from India. And it's an old question, but as relevant as ever. Is it time for India to revisit the relevance of reservation? Is it holding our health services hostage and creating social inequality? We'll bring you a special report. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
At least 3 people were killed and 20 wounded in a blast at a mosque in Afghanistan's restive Nangarhar province, a hotbed of the Islamic State, Khorasan. In a bizarre diktat, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan ordered all TV channels in the country to flash a map of Pakistan, which includes the Indian territory of Junagadh in Gujarat. Imran Khan unveiled this new political map in August 2020. Indian security forces have neutralized 2 terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir's Srinagar city. The encounter broke out after the police cordoned off a house following the presence of terrorists there, and the terrorists opened fire on the security forces. China's capital Beijing cancelled several events after detecting 45 cases in the latest wave, the most since June 2020. An American journalist detained in Myanmar since May have been sentenced to 11 years in prison on charges of unlawful association, incitement, and breaching visa rules. Sudan's Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan named himself as the head of the new Transitional Council, shrugging off domestic and international pressure to reverse the coup. A U.S. court has granted former President Donald Trump's request to temporarily halt the release of White House documents that could implicate him in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. UK's longest river, Thames, that was once declared biologically dead, is now home to sharks and supports 115 species of fish and wildlife, from seahorses to seals. Brazil have become the first team from South America to seal qualification for next year's FIFA World Cup in Qatar. The five-time world champions beat Colombia 1-0 in Sao Paulo, with Lucas Paqueta scoring the lone goal in the 72nd minute. Unbeaten Brazil have won 11 of their 12 matches now and lead the 10-team group by 9 points from Argentina. Spain's Paula Badosa has stunned top seed Aryna Sabalenka in their opening match of the WTA Tour Finals in Guadalajara, Mexico. Sabalenka led 4-2 in the first set, but then lost 10 consecutive games in an error-strewn display to give Badosa a 6-4-6 love victory. Maria Sakkari beat Poland's Iga Świątek in straight sets in the other match in this group.
Tonight we want to focus on Europe. Is it heading for war? There's talk of a military clash. The border is on the boil, troops have been deployed, nuclear bombers are buzzing in the skies, and presidents are being called names. What is this conflict all about? Migrants. Thousands of them trying to enter Europe illegally by force and allegedly aided by some states. This is being called the weaponization of migrants. Europe says these migrants are being used as a weapon to punish European countries and to destabilize them. Let me show you what the scene looks like. This is the Poland-Belarus border, like a war zone, threatening not just Poland but the whole of Europe. These pictures are from earlier this week. These migrants are violent. They have come with shovels. They're cutting down trees and using them as weapons to breach the fences just to get to the other side. It shows their desperation. It's a humanitarian crisis, but there's more to it. Europe says it has been orchestrated, that these people have been brought here by Belarus and Russia, that they have been weaponized because Russia wants to destabilize Europe. What does Russia say? How has it responded? Russia has deployed nuclear-capable bombers. For 2 days now, these planes have been flying near the Polish border. Escorting these Russian planes are Belarusian fighter jets. Belarus says these flights will now be a regular affair. On the other side of the border, Poland has deployed 15,000 soldiers to deal with 2,000 migrants, or weapons, as Europe is calling them. This is not an active war zone yet, but it has all the makings of one. Think about it. In the past, wars led to migrant crises. Now migration might trigger a war. On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss why the threat of migration wars is real. We'll begin with the latest from the Poland-Belarus border. The crisis is deepening. The flashpoint is near Kudznica. It's a village in northeastern Poland, and this is a major border crossing. Migrants have gathered here in the area close by. They're on the Belarusian side, and they've been here for several days now. The conditions are harsh. The migrants have no food or water. They're camping in freezing temperatures. How did they get here? Poland says Belarus is transporting them by the hundreds. That they were brought from West Asia on special flights. They were promised a better life in Europe, and then they were abandoned at the border. Poland is calling this a hybrid attack by Belarus. Why would Belarus attack Poland, or Europe for that matter? Because Europe imposed sanctions on Belarus. After the controversial election of President Lukashenko and the crackdown on protesters in Belarus, Europe imposed sanctions. This was last year. Now, this migrant crisis is in retaliation for those sanctions. That's what Europe says, and not without reason. The Belarusian leader, Alexander Lukashenko, is making fresh threats after weaponizing migrants. He is threatening to cut off Europe's gas supply. This is about the Yamal gas pipeline. Russia uses this pipeline to transport gas to Poland and Germany, and it passes through Belarus. So President Lukashenko has now threatened to cut off this line.
We are warming Europe, and they threaten us to shut the border after all. And what if we cut natural gas supplies?
Poland is responding to these threats by showing the world what Lukashenko is up to. The Polish Interior Ministry has released a damaging video. It shows migrants gathered in Minsk, the capital of Belarus. Look at this. We don't know if these migrants are at the border or if they are in Minsk. Wherever they are trapped. Poland refuses to take them and Belarus does not want them. So they're setting up makeshift camps at the border, right next to the barbed wire that separates Poland and Belarus. The conditions here are dire. Some migrants have shared their plight from these makeshift tents.
We are calling on concerned parties. We want an official from the government to come here. We are stranded in this mess. There are disabled people and children among us. There are children who are 1 or 2 years old, as well as pregnant women. We don't have food. The conditions here are terrible. We are bringing trees from the forest to light bonfires and warm ourselves.
It's a tough battle for survival. Many have died of hypothermia or extreme cold in this region. Some others are resorting to violent means to get into Poland. These are people who fled war zones only to be caught between two hostile countries and life-threatening cold. It's an extremely unfortunate situation. The world is watching these pictures with horror. What are world leaders doing? Well, they're fighting each other. The United Nations Security Council met yesterday. They were supposed to discuss this crisis, but the session turned into a showdown between the West and the East. The West, that's the US and European leaders, blame Russia and Belarus. Their representatives appeared together before the press. But this show of strength did not help. All the West could do was express concern and blame Belarus for launching a hybrid war.
This tactic is unacceptable and calls for a strong international reaction and cooperation in order to hold Belarus accountable. It demonstrates how the Lukashenko regime has become a threat to regional stability. We will remain united and determined to protect the EU against these hybrid operations by Belarusian authorities.
How did the East respond? Russia sent its own ambassador to make a statement, and he completely denied these allegations.
There is a game of shifting blame now by European Union. They want to picture Belarus and sometimes even Russia as perpetrators of this crisis. Well, we've got used that the main slogan of European and Western politics right now is keep calm and blame Russia, so it's no surprise for us. But the facts are a very stubborn thing, and they do not support the version of events presented by our Western colleagues.
So after hours of discussion, this is what the world got. More charges and countercharges. These migrants are now pawns in a geopolitical game, and their plight is about to get worse. Europe wants to close its doors to migrants. It wants to build walls. The European Union is considering a plan. It wants to build fences at European borders to block illegal migrants. Last month, the Polish parliament voted in favor of building a $400 million wall along the border with Belarus. Well, this has been tried before. America, too, tried building a border wall. It was the pet project of Donald Trump, remember. But it failed to stop migrants. The checkpoints were crowded, borders became more dangerous, and children died while trying to cross. Walls are not the answer to what is now a universal problem. Migrants are an undeniable reality in today's conflict-ridden world, a reality made more dangerous when they're used to settle political scores. And for Europe especially, migration is a tricky issue. 26.4 million migrants already live in the EU, 26.4 million. Every year, there are many others who cross the border illegally. Just how many, you ask? In 2015, the number was 1 million. Some crossed through the Western Mediterranean, some through Central Mediterranean, or land borders with Belarus, Moldova, Russia and Ukraine. In 2020, Europe recorded over 125,000 illegal border crossings. So far in 2021, there have been more than 85,000 cases. The number is up 66% compared to the same period last year. Where are these migrants coming from? Syria, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Somalia, Iraq, the Sudan, among others. Why do they want to go to Europe? Because once in Europe, they can apply for refugee status. And as and when it's granted, they will be legally allowed to stay in the country for 1 year or longer. Many will also receive help to integrate into the European society. They're looking for a better life. And the EU sees this arrangement as an integral part of European values. For migrants, it's an opportunity to start afresh. By the end of 2020, 10% of the world's refugees were living in Europe, 10%. Now, as more migrants line up, should it be incumbent upon Europe to take them in? Or will that be nothing short of punishing Europe for past charity? Who then will look after these migrants? Who will be responsible for their fate? Where will they go? There are no clear answers in Europe or outside. Migration, as I said, is a universal problem, and no country has been able to find a foolproof solution. What's happening at the Belarus border is not unique. It's the same story around the world. Earlier today, a boat with 62 migrants was intercepted in Cyprus. On board were migrants from Syria and Lebanon, 22 men, 11 women, 28 children. They were trying to enter Europe through Italy. Bad weather struck, so they turned towards Cyprus. It's not clear what will happen to them next. Cyprus might decide to send them back home. This is a universal crisis. People around the world are fleeing poverty, war, climate change. Since 2011, 5.5 million people have already fled Syria. 4.6 million people have fled Venezuela to date. 2.7 million people have fled Afghanistan in the last 2 decades. 2.3 million fled South Sudan since 2013. On your screen are also numbers from DR Congo, Sahel, Somalia, Central African Republic, Burundi, Iraq, Tigray and Yemen. At least 1 million Rohingyas have fled Myanmar. Where did all of these people go? And should it be incumbent upon other countries to take them in? At what point should a line be drawn? Let's look at India's example. When the parcel was passed to India, New Delhi said the influx of migrants infringes on the rights of Indian citizens. It also poses grave security challenges for India. The 1971 United Nations Refugee Convention gives refugees the right to international protection. But only 140 countries have signed this convention. Countries recognize that while migrants have the right to life, so do citizens. And resources, unfortunately, are limited in every country, no matter how rich. So there isn't much that governments can really do beyond a point. Either they look after the citizens, ensure that they have their rights, their food, shelter, healthcare, schools and employment, or they leave their borders open so that more people can come in and add to the fight for resources. It's a question about whose rights a country should prioritize, its own citizens or migrants. It's a very complicated problem. It's a problem where the line between what's right and what's wrong is blurred. And very rarely do we have a clear villain in situations like this. Look at what's happening on the US border. Migrant caravans arrive at America's border every few months. Is it fair for the US to be forced to take them in? It's not. But should the US be allowed to whip these migrants, detain them, separate children from parents? No, it shouldn't. So what should countries do? How should they deal with migrants? Well, there is no template. And that's the tragedy. It's not like countries are not taking people in. They are. Europe, like I mentioned, has 10% of the world's migrants. India has opened its doors to Tibetans, Afghans, Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka. Bangladesh is home to more than 1 million Rohingya refugees. More than 3.1 million refugees are living in the United States. Every country seems to be doing its bit, but at some point, they too need to draw the line. And many countries are also attending to a queue of legal migrants. This year alone, 23.2 million people applied for the green card lottery in the United States. These are people who come with skill sets, valid documents, expertise they can put to use and help the US economy grow. Canada has one of the most popular immigration programs. So does Germany. A lot of countries like Italy are offering citizenship in exchange of investment. Nearly 100,000 foreigners get British citizenship every year. But does that mean the UK should also welcome those who are trying to illegally cross over via the English Channel? The crisis at Dover has hit a record high. At least 1,000 people tried to enter the UK on a single day. This number is unprecedented. And these people don't have valid documents. They don't have work permits or technical skills to offer. So letting them in, giving them a refugee status comes with a cost. And it's not easy for governments. It becomes even harder when countries start weaponizing migrants, creating an artificial crisis. Belarus's president, Lukashenko, is guilty of both. He wants to get back at the EU for sanctions. What better way than to paint the bloc as heartless? Here's something that we must realize. Migration cannot be seen through a black and white lens. While forced displacement is heartbreaking, countries are not exactly spoilt for choice. And now let's talk about another border crisis. This one is a more traditional one and perhaps an even more dangerous one. I'm talking about the India-China border standoff. Yesterday, Xi Jinping cemented his place in Chinese history. The Communist Party passed a resolution, one that assures a record third term to Xi Jinping. So President Xi is here to stay. In fact, his grip on power is even more firm. What does that mean for India? It means, among other things, that China will remain aggressive on the border with India. Beijing will double down on its territorial claims. So New Delhi needs to plan for future threats, as it has been doing. Indian forces have been ramping up their deployments, but their preparations have hit into some logistical issues. They can't move the Brahmos missile to the border. Why is that? Because the roads leading to the line of actual control are not wide enough, and the matter is now in court. India needs wider roads in the Char Dham region. It falls within the Indian state of Uttarakhand. There is a proposal to build a network of roads here, roads that can be used by the military to transport critical equipment, like the Brahmos missile. Now, this should be a no-brainer. Road connectivity is essential for the armed forces. Then why can't the government of India expand these roads? Because the matter is stuck in a legal tussle since 2018, 3 years and counting. It's a matter of national security, by the way. The road expansion project was first pushed in 2016. In 2018, it was challenged by an NGO in India's Supreme Court. The petition said the expansion could have an adverse impact on the Himalayan ecology. It said the felling of trees and cutting of hills could raise the risk of a landslide. The court seemed to agree, so it passed an order limiting the width of the roads to 5 meters. Then last year, China provoked India at the border in Galwan. The threat perception increased. The government of India sought a revision of the earlier order. The width of the road cannot be limited to 5 meters, it said. We need 10-meter wide roads. What for? To provide logistical support to the army. The government says the current roads are quote-unquote irrelevant to the needs of the army today. Let me read out the Indian government's arguments for you. This is what the centre has told the Supreme Court. It says the army has to take the Brahmos. A large area will be required. If it results in landslides, the army will tackle it. How do we go if the roads are not wide enough? These are inhospitable terrains where the army needs to move heavy vehicles, machineries, weapons, missiles, tanks, troops, food supplies. Our Brahmos missile is 42 feet long and needs large vehicles to carry its launchers. If the army cannot move its missile launchers and machineries up to the northern China border, then how will it fight a war if it breaks out? The argument is a valid one. What's the court's view? Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, one of the judges hearing the case, made an observation this week, and this is what he said. We cannot deny the fact that at such a height, the security of the nation is at stake. Can the highest constitutional court say that we will override the defense needs, particularly in the face of recent events? Can we say environment will triumph over the defense of the nation? This was the question that the court posed. The petitioner, the one opposing the road expansion, says that this is not about the army's needs. This is about the Char Dham circuit, a road to connect 4 major shrines, Badrinath, Kedarnath, Gangotri and Yamunotri in the upper Himalayas. A pilgrimage to these 4 shrines is of great significance to Hindus. The Supreme Court of India has observed that concerns of both sides need to be balanced. The court has reserved its judgment. And this case is a perfect example of the internal challenges India faces while dealing with hostile neighbors like China, where we delay matters of national security because someone has gone to court. The strength of a democratic, transparent system can also be its handicap sometimes. Let's shift our attention to Afghanistan. It's Friday today, and once again, terrorists have struck a mosque during Friday prayers in Afghanistan. This has become a nightmare on repeat. Almost every Friday now, a bomb goes off. What are the Taliban doing to break this cycle of violence? Well, they're busy target practicing at the Bamiyan Buddhas. Here's a report.
Another Friday, another explosion at a mosque. This time, it happened in Nangarhar. Friday prayers were underway at a mosque in the Spinghar district. This area is a hotbed of the Islamic State. At least 3 people have died, 15 others are wounded. Terrorists in Afghanistan now target a mosque almost every Friday. The Taliban that had vowed to protect Afghans are failing them week after week. What are the new leaders of Afghanistan up to? They are busy insulting minorities. Here is the proof. This is the Bamiyan province of Afghanistan. The Taliban has built a shooting range here, right at the site where the famous Buddha statues stood. The Taliban destroyed them in 2001. They are now practicing their aim on the structures that remain. That was the sound of a rocket-propelled grenade. The Talibs fired 3 of those in a symbolic strike on the diversity of Afghanistan. The Taliban is slowly dismantling all the symbols of minorities. The most recent one to go down was this: a statue of Abdul Al-Mazzari, a Hazara leader. Mazzari was declared a martyr for national unity. He was fiercely anti-Taliban and a champion of the rights of the Hazaras. In 1995, the Taliban had abducted Mazzari and killed him. They have now destroyed his statue and replaced it with a Quran. The Taliban promised an evolved 2.0 version of themselves when they took power this time, but they have proved to be the opposite. Violence continues across the country. Terrorist groups like the ISIS-K are carrying out attacks on ordinary Afghans and the Taliban, while the rulers of Kabul are target practicing in Bamiyan. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
There's an old saying in cricket, catchers win matches. If you don't hold on to your catch, you can lose a match even in a winning situation. The loss hurts even more when it's a World Cup. Far more when your team is undefeated, when it has won all 5 matches in the tournament, stormed its way into the semi-final, put a remarkable performance in the match, and then a catch drop turns the game on its head and takes the trophy out of your grasp. It can seriously be quite hurtful. I'm sure all of you know what I'm talking about. The T20 World Cup semi-final held in Dubai last evening. It was an outstanding game of cricket. Both Australia and Pakistan put up a brilliant performance, but in the end, the Australian side emerged victorious. They displayed tremendous grit. They chased down a stiff target of 177 and defeated Pakistan by 5 wickets. Tonight I want to talk about the man being blamed for Pakistan's loss, Hasan Ali. He missed a crucial catch. He dropped Matthew Wade in deep mid-wicket. After which, Wade slammed 3 back-to-back sixes and won the match for Australia. He was declared man of the match. Hasan Ali, on the other hand, became a punching bag for disgruntled Pakistani fans. It all started with a statement from the Pakistani captain, Babar Azam. He categorically blamed Hasan Ali for the loss. He said, and I'm quoting what he has said, "The turning point of the match was the dropped catch of Matthew Wade. As a player, you should always be on your toes and take any opportunity that arises." What followed was a flurry of personal comments on social media, charges of match fixing and derogatory remarks about Hasan Ali. He's being trolled for costing Pakistan a place in the final. They say the World Cup slipped from Hasan Ali's hands. That's the prevailing narrative in Pakistan, both online and offline. People are disappointed, but the way they're expressing their disappointment is appalling. This is what his Instagram showed last night. This is what it looked like. Filled with vile and abusive comments, slurs and personal insults aimed at his family and faith. People are abusing his wife, Samia Arzu, an aeronautical engineer who happens to be an Indian. Doesn't help. She hails from the state of Haryana in India. She married Hasan Ali in 2019. It may sound bizarre, but Pakistani fans say that he lost the match to please his wife, whatever that means. Some have gone as far as to call her a raw agent. Some are also abusing him for his identity. You see, Hasan Ali is a Shia Muslim in a Sunni majority Pakistan. People say he dropped the catch on purpose because Shias apparently don't want Pakistan to succeed. It's a flood of hatred. It's unsettling. But instead of coming out in Hasan Ali's support, some so-called cricketing legends in Pakistan are further adding to the player's misery with statements like these.
ऐसी सिचुएशन में कैच ड्रॉप होना तो मेरा मतलब है कि उसके बाद फिर 3 छक्के भी लग गए और वो सारा सिनेरियो ही चेंज हो गया कि चलो कैच छोड़ने के बाद कोई अच्छा बॉल हो, लेकिन मेरे ख्याल में फील्डिंग हमेशा से मैं इस चीज़ पे बहुत ज़्यादा वो करता हूँ कि फील्डिंग का जिस दिन पाकिस्तान टीम की फील्डिंग तगड़ी होगी पाकिस्तान टीम मैच जीत जाएगा.
Now here's the thing. This is not the first time this has happened. Perhaps it may not be the last time. Singling out one player for a team's loss is never okay. And it applies to everyone, to every team, to every country. But what's shameful in Pakistan's case is that the hate is not limited to online trolls, to unknown accounts on social media. It is coming from every direction, from Hasan Ali's own team, from his own fraternity, from former players, and from cricket experts. Here's hoping that better sense prevails. Talking about better sense, picture this. It's been a long day at work, you're stressed to the core, you decide to head home. You switch off mentally, a lot of us do. But you're unable to, because your boss won't stop texting you about work. What do? Well, most of us comply. We don't have a choice. In Portugal, you can now sue your boss for doing this. The Portuguese parliament has passed a new law, one that makes it illegal for bosses to contact their employees after work hours. Well, if they do, employees can take legal action, get their employer penalized with a hefty fine. Now, this rather interesting law is called the right to rest. How aptly titled. It was passed by the Portuguese Parliament on Friday. Here's what it states. Companies with more than 10 employees can incur fines for contacting staff beyond shift hours. In case it's urgent, the employer will have to pay for the amenities utilized while their employees work from home, such as gas, internet and electricity bills. And that's not all. This law will further be enhanced to include more specific rules, like banning employers from monitoring their workers at home and ensuring that workers get to meet their boss every 2 months in order to stop them from feeling isolated or lonely. This law has been passed, keeping in mind the growing number of people working from home due to the pandemic. Portugal's Minister of Labour and Social Security says the government plans to make remote working as easy as possible. What's in it for the Portuguese government, though? It plans to build a virtual workforce through this law to attract more digital nomads, as they call, to the country. What's that? The term basically refers to someone who performs his or her daily work entirely online. It became so popular last year that it was added to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Portugal is trying to accelerate its economy by attracting digital nomads to the country. It wants them to come and work there and also get a chance to travel before explore its scenic beaches, boost the tourism sector without having to worry about work. It's quite an elaborate plan. The country has even set up a digital nomad village with free Wi-Fi and workstations. But coming back to the law, Portugal is not the first country to pass such a legislation. Several countries are trying to improve work-life balance of their citizens, ensuring that you're not forced to take your work home. In 2017, France passed the right to disconnect law. It banned bosses from texting their employees after work hours. It also gave people the right to switch off their work devices once they've left office. Italy too has a similar law. It ensures that employers respect resting periods, holidays and personal privacy. Then we have Spain. It passed a similar law in 2019, allowing workers to disconnect from office after work hours. What about India? In 2018, a right to disconnect bill was introduced in the Indian Parliament. It proposed that no disciplinary action can be taken if employees do not respond to work-related calls once their shift has ended. Guess what? The bill could not be passed. Perhaps it's time for India to reconsider it. Let us know what you think. And staying with India and going to some history. The year was 1951. India was newly independent. Its constitution was just a year old. Only 18.33% of Indians were literate. Around 80% of Indians were poor. India needed to take long strides if it were to make progress. So India legalized caste-based reservation. The idea was to uplift certain pockets of the society, put them at the same level with others. Seats were reserved for certain communities at schools, jobs and legislature. The arrangement was supposed to end in 10 years. The 10 years passed. And it happened 7 times over. 70 years have passed. It's 2021 now. Reservation remains a bitter truth of India. The popular term is quota. There's quota in government schools, in government colleges, government jobs, even for promotion in government jobs. Who is this reservation for? Scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. In 1990, OBC or other backward classes were added. As recently as 2013, 10% quota was added for the poor, EWS, economically weaker section. Today, in most government schools, at least 50% of the seats are reserved. In many states, it's far more than 50%. The growing percentage of reservation is eating into dreams. It is becoming a nightmare for those in the unreserved category. And I will tell you why. There are some serious fundamental problems with reservation in India. Number one, if reservation is about creating a level playing field, why do we need it after a certain point? And I'll give you an example. Say a student from a backward class wants to study medicine. So she can avail quota at the country's most premier medical institution. AIIMS, the All India Institute of Medical Science. It has a 15% reservation for scheduled castes, 7.5% for scheduled tribes, 27% for OBC, 10% for EWS, economically weaker section, and 5% reservation for PWD, persons with disability. That's 64.5% of the seats reserved. 64.5%. With this, an Indian medical college is supposedly creating a level playing field for all medical aspirants. 5 years later, a batch of doctors from diverse social and economic backgrounds graduates as equals. Same emblem on the certificate, same salary if they are to apply for residency. Same social status, they're all doctors. And yet, when the same batch of equal students applies for Masters of Doctor, MD, the level playing field vanishes. Certain students get an undue advantage because there is reservation in the master's course too. The same AIIMS has lower cutoff scores for SC, ST, OBC, EWS, so on and so forth. The cycle continues. Then there is reservation in jobs, reservation even in promotion. Employees who get their jobs under quota also have reservation in promotion. Can you believe that? Would you call this an undue advantage? I would. And that's a fundamental problem. This system is designed for equality, but it's promoting inequality. It's encouraging mediocrity. Fundamental problem number 2, India has reservation for certain castes and tribes. They're clubbed under the categories of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Now the problem is, caste is a permanent attribute. So is tribe. And neither changes with one's financial or social status. So on what basis are we reserving seats for certain castes and tribes? Yes, they may have been backward during independence. But it's been 70 years and more. The world has changed. India has changed. What about the law? Indian laws have changed too. We have decriminalized same-sex relationships in this country. We have delivered verdicts in favor of privacy, but we don't want to touch reservation. Perhaps it's politics. Reservation makes a cameo in every major election in India. One side promises more quota, another champions equality. Reservation is used for vote bank politics. And this is not news if you're in India. Reservation stereotypes certain sections. An SC, ST student, no matter how meritorious, is always viewed through the lens of quota. Her achievements are always attributed to quota. Reservation is divisive. A person who misses out on a college seat because of reservation is bound to hold her grudges against the reserved category. This helps politicians divide and rule. But it does not help the voters, the students, the job seekers. Reservation is harming India, not helping it. Let me once again come back to the example of medicine. Reservation is holding healthcare hostage. In the middle of a pandemic, India's healthcare system is functioning on 66% capacity. An entire batch of postgraduate students have not entered medical colleges yet. Their admission/counseling is on hold. Do you know why? Because there is an ongoing case in India's top court against quota in medical seats. Who is this crisis helping? Who is quota helping? Today, we don't even have legit data to back the need for reserving seats for a certain community. And it's not like other countries do not have reservation. Many of them do. Canada has certain policies in place for aboriginals and minorities. Japan has laws that create equal opportunities for indigenous and tribal people. Norway requires companies to have 40% women on board. Some of these laws are really progressive. But India's reservation system is archaic, out of date. It's time to revisit it, to rethink who the real beneficiaries of this system are. It's time to ensure the fundamental right to education without blocking school seats. It's time to ensure the right to equality without giving undue advantage to a select few. Reservation was supposed to make up for the injustices of the caste system. Today it has created a social division of its own. Reservation has given birth to a new kind of structural crisis. Certain seats have become untouchable. The constant increase of quota is nothing short of oppression. It is punishment for those born to non-reserved categories. The current system of reservation violates every sense of justice, equality and merit. Reservation was meant to accommodate people, not leave them out. Think about it. We're wrapping up the show, leaving you with Gravitas images. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.